Good morning. We start in Victoria, where the state has recorded its second largest daily spike in coronavirus cases. 627 new infections confirmed in just 24 hours, and tragically, 8 more lives lost. Dougal Beattie has the details. Dougal, good morning. These numbers are not promising.
Yeah, another shocking total for Victoria today, Davina. The Premier, Daniel Andrews, has confirmed there's been 627 new cases in the past 24 hours, and that brings the total number of active cases in the state to around 6,000. And sadly, as you say, another 8 people have died. 4 of those are connected to aged care. Among the deaths are 2 men in their 50s, 2 men in their 70s, 3 men in their 80s, and a woman in her 70s. Victoria's death toll now stands at 112. Today's figure is just under 100 fewer than yesterday's record total of 723. 349 people are in hospital. 37 of those are receiving intensive care, and this is now having a profound effect on hospitals and their workers. There's now 1,030 healthcare workers currently having COVID-19, and there are 928 active cases in aged care. The Premier tried to explain these numbers. He said the ADF and police are still finding too many positive cases who are not self-isolating at home. Transmission in workplaces is also a major factor in driving these numbers. Daniel Andrews has also confirmed he had a productive phone call with the Prime Minister Scott Morrison last night. There's been a lot of talk about stage 4 restrictions, and today public health officials will now analyse the data halfway through this lockdown in Victoria. That analysis will essentially point to the next steps in terms of restrictions for Victoria. He foreshadowed that more restrictions are coming, but they haven't been formulated as yet. Those announcements will be made in the coming days. But here's what Daniel Andrews had to say about people failing to self-isolate.
More than 130 unsuccessful visits, so around 1 in 4 people cannot be found at home. There'll be a multitude of reasons for that, but what I can confirm for you is that more than 100 cases have been referred to Victoria Police. It is simply unacceptable for you to have this virus and not be at home.
So this crisis is certainly not showing any signs of slowing down in Victoria. We'll now have to wait and find out what these next steps are.
I wonder what more they can do. OK, Dougal, thank you. And as Victoria struggles to control its alarming second wave, the Prime Minister has spoken to the state's Premier. Our political reporter Jonathan Kersley is in Canberra with the details. Jono, good morning. What was discussed?
Davina, essentially it was about what support Victoria might need and whether further restrictions could be imposed. In fact, we've heard Victoria's Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton say in just the last couple of moments that a stage 4 lockdown similar to what New Zealand went through is being explored. That is quite an extraordinary development. The Prime Minister Scott Morrison reiterated this morning that the state will get whatever support it needs. The federal government will also continue to help out. There was a similar message this morning from Queensland's Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk. We know South Australia has already sent in nurses to assist. The ADF has gone in to work on things like contact tracing and testing centres, as well as the door knocking to see if positive cases are at home that Dougal Beattie was talking about just a few moments ago. And as Victoria struggles to get these case numbers steady or even under control, the Prime Minister told Ben Fordham on Sydney's 2GB radio this morning the state relinquishing some of its own powers to the Commonwealth at this stage, not on the table.
Well, we're always ready to support them with all the requests they've made and to be making further offers, as we constantly do. But those sorts of things haven't been in contemplation. The level of community outbreak and community transmission in Victoria is the great challenge down there, and there's still a lot of work to do, and we're not on top of it yet. And they're obviously the things that the Premier and I have been discussing very regularly.
Interestingly, Davina, all state and territory leaders, aside from Daniel Andrews, spoke with Prime Minister Scott Morrison this morning in what the Prime Minister described as a national security briefing. It has apparently been organised at the request of the state, so we do await more official details exactly what that conversation was about. There very well could have been questions over whether the states need to provide more support for Victoria, like what South Australia has done as the case numbers continue to cause alarm. Davina.
Jono, thank you. And police will issue fines to those involved in an anti-mask protest at Melbourne's Shrine of Remembrance this morning. Lana Murphy reports.
Well, there's police on horseback and plenty of officers on the ground, but the only other people gathered here at the Shrine of Remembrance are members of the media. It appears that many of these protesters have been scared off by warnings from the police force and the Premier saying if they gathered, it would be an illegal gathering and they would all be fined and potentially arrested. There were a few who gave it a red-hot crack this morning. There were about 30 people gathered at the shrine as the sun rose. They had a moment's silence and there were a couple of speeches before officers moved in and told them what they were doing was illegal. They moved away without any particular fanfare, but they were waving the Red Ensign flags, which they say is the true federal flag of Australia. These protesters are saying that today is the Commonwealth Day of Australia and they have every right to claim their right to freedom.
Here the time of the Anzac.
So any person gathering,
religious persons,
if you 2 or 3 minutes, when we come back,
can we talk peacefully? Give us 5 and we'll be out of here.
We're peaceful.
Can we speak peacefully, please?
Organisers of the protest have told 9 News that any police members who moved them on were actually committing a war crime and would be held accountable. But it seems there's no crimes being committed here at the moment. It was scheduled to kick off at 10 a.m. and police will remain here until the coast is clear.
We've just had an update on coronavirus cases in New South Wales. 21 new cases reported in the past 24 hours. Among the cases, 6 are linked to the Apollo Potts Point cluster. 3 are linked to Our Lady of Lebanon Church cluster and 2 are tied to the Tyrock Wetherill Park cluster. Deep cleaning is well underway at multiple venues across Sydney this morning, including the Harpoon and Hotel Harry at Surrey Hills. A person who fell ill visited there on July 26 from 2:15 to 11 p.m. So anyone who visited the hotel in that time frame is being urged to get tested immediately. It's also been revealed all of the outbreaks in New South Wales have been traced back to Victoria.
The cases to date have all been linked back to strains that were circulating in Victoria. So we believe that there have been introductions from Victoria. In some cases, as in the Crossroads cluster, we were able to trace it back to the exact source. In some other cases, we were not able to.
Just 2 of the new cases were from hotel quarantine. 2 others are under investigation. And health authorities and police in Queensland say they're holding their breath now the state is caught up in its own coronavirus scare. Let's go live to Lily Greer on the Gold Coast. Lily, good morning. Police have confirmed a new case overnight and it's linked to 3 women who allegedly returned from Melbourne.
That's right, Davina. Queensland has 1 new confirmed case of COVID-19 overnight, a 27-year-old man from Bellbird Park. It's believed this man contracted coronavirus from a family member who may have dined at the same restaurant that one of the returned cases from Melbourne also dined at earlier this month. That's after 9,000 COVID tests were undertaken in Queensland since yesterday. This all comes, of course, as the countdown starts for Queensland's border to shut. Everything's going to change from 1 a.m. tomorrow morning. Anyone trying to get into Queensland from the Greater Sydney area is going to be cut off. That's people coming from 31 local government areas in New South Wales that are now considered COVID hotspots. If you're from there, you won't be let in. If you're a Queenslander coming home, it'll mean 2 weeks mandatory hotel quarantine at your own cost. These new restrictions have seen lines of traffic start here at the border and there's lots of foot traffic in the airports, lots of passengers returning. Take a listen to what Queensland's Deputy Police Commissioner had to say this morning.
We're expecting around 8,000 people coming into Brisbane today from interstate. Obviously, a number of Queenslanders wanting to come back home before the restrictions come into effect tomorrow morning.
The Queensland Premier is urging people to consider their travel plans as traffic piles up here. Plenty of people scrambling to make their way back into Queensland. Davina, just to reiterate, from Saturday morning, 1 a.m, the border here slams shut to many people from New South Wales.
Yeah, 5 million Sydney-siders. OK, Lily, thank you.